Hey guys, welcome to my channel. This is Victoria, the amazing Vicky, or if you follow her on Instagram, it's at VicTictoria. And it's just, your Twitter's the same, right?
Yeah, but
you're not like Taylor.
No, we might change it to 99 locks, you know?
Oh, that's your like sub Twitter name, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've been Team Shani since high school, so
yeah, things haven't changed.
I don't know anything. I've like tried. Maybe I might go with Shannon with the night, but I just feel like Team Shani is so like for the culture. I don't.
Got it.
It's true friendship. But Vicky here is a. Can you explain what you do? Because I don't want to mess it up. I want you to tell all your glory of who you are.
Sure. Okay, so I work in sexual and reproductive health. I don't know if the camera.
Either or. I like trying. Okay. I be trying to give eye contact because sometimes I just be sitting here like this, like, oh wait, shoot, we're still filming. So.
Okay, perfect. So I work in sexual and reproductive health. I'm a health education coordinator. So most of my job is just teaching people about sexual and reproductive health so that they can make better decisions to be healthy and learn about their body. And that's like the easy, like one sentence word of what I do. I run like a bunch of different programmings. I'm very big on like youth programming, so like peer education, Black young girl programming, programming with individuals who have disabilities or intellectual disabilities. And then I also do a lot of work around like intimate partner violence awareness and domestic violence awareness. Yeah. Those are the umbrellas,
small, right?
Yeah, or the little parts,
little pockets, so
in the overall umbrella.
And I think it's so important. One of my questions I had this time, I have like a little bit of a list. I'm getting used to this whole thing, but I think one of my questions was just like, or notes that I had to mention is the importance of your presence as a Black woman into this field, because I mean, when you think of the community in general, it's really taboo to have the talk. Like, I never really heard of the talk until I watched stuff on TV. I was like, what's the talk? And even asking that, it was just like, oh, you don't need to worry about that. Like, something you shouldn't be doing, or something only fast people need. Like, you know, that kind of, that brush over that our community kind of does when we don't really want to talk about something. More so previous, like, older generations, what they'll do to hinder themselves. So I would say, as a Black woman in this field, what are some of the things that you've seen that you're like, oh, I'm so glad I was here?
So many. There's just so many layers. Jesus, yeah. There's just so many layers, because one, it's like, well, first you have just to talk about, say sex. People can't even say the word sex. Like, they get queasy, they get weird, they get horny, like all these things. Okay, we're not gonna shame, but people just cannot say it because it's so taboo. And my biggest thing that I've never understood is, why does sex sell so much and we don't know nothing about it? Also, they're always pushing it. Like, families are always saying, when you have kids, when you have children, when you get married, all of these things. But like, what, okay, after that? So now I'm in this relationship and I'm married. What do I do now to have kids? Like, we've never had this conversation. But not even like actual intercourse. Like, do you know your menstrual cycle? Do you know why you're bleeding? Do you know how your menstrual cycle starts if you have one? Do you know your breasts? Do you know how to check for breast cancer? Do you know your pelvic floor? Can you tell when something is wrong? Do you know what your vagina looks like so you can see if you got an STD or not? Like, do you know all of these things? No.
Right.
Because they don't teach you, or they don't talk about it. And a lot of it is because the person, you know, family members weren't taught and they weren't able to speak about it. So it's one, there it goes, like, already trying to break that generational boundary of not talking about it. Because in the Black community, if there's one thing we love to not talk about, is sex and the good and bad things that come from it.
We'll make songs. We'll all sing the songs.
We'll sing the songs about
it. Dance move.
We'll have Babyface and the Monicas and the Jodeci's, and we'll say this is baby making music, but no one really talks about like what do you mean by baby making. But then also we like to sweep a lot of things underneath the rug. So that uncle or family member that might be a little too handsy, we just say, oh, don't go sit by them. But we don't say why.
Or when people come over, it's like, well, you need to change your clothes. It's just like,
why I gotta change my clothes?
Right, it was fine. Right, it was fine not too long ago. Now, what? They don't really explain the premise. It's just you don't do it. But of course, as kids, you're always gonna be curious as to
what's
why.
going on.
Yeah,
and that's another thing. Just general curiosity. A lot of times, even with the like students I work with, because I work from a range of as young as like elementary school up until like adults. But with the younger ones, it's not so much that they want to do something, it's more so they're curious. They saw it somewhere, and now it's 2020. We say it, we've been saying it before, but we're saying it even more now. Technology is everywhere. They have access to everything. So if anything, you are, by the time like a child or someone comes up to you who's young and asks you a question, they already have been told or filled with different things that may not be true. So you're already like playing catch up.
Exactly.
Because they're already seeing a lot of it.
By neglecting to like elaborate on it, you're only allowing them the door to just continue back into the source that they've been getting it from. You don't know if those are valid sources. You don't know if they're telling your kids, what they should be doing. Right.
And also, even small things like don't use actual soap inside your vagina. Like your vagina is a self-cleaning machine. You could put some soap around it,
right?
But you could do all those things. Or you don't put it inside
when you use the bathroom.
Wipe front to back, not back to front, because you're gonna get a UTI. Like just small things like that. Mm-hmm. But specifically to get back to like being a Black woman in this field, originally when I started, it was more so like, a lot of people just don't know about like their bodies. Like they don't know about their sexual reproductive health. They don't know about like birth control options. They don't know about STI testing. And that's really why I just started like using a condom. I mean, you remember I used to like pass out condoms on campus.
She really did. That's the crazy part. She really did.
So I would just have all those conversations about like being free and all those things, and just like being able to have not having uncomfortable conversations about sex. Like to be able to just speak about sex the same way you may talk about food or drinks or something like that.
People are so comfortable with the innuendos and
but nobody wants to talk about actually it.
Right.
So that's where I started in it. But then I also started being into it more because like I would start volunteering with like those who are survivors of intimate partner violence, and it all comes back to education. Like everything in America in this world is systematic, so it all comes back to education. If we take it back to just how they have always policed Black bodies, especially Black women, if you take it back to slavery, where they would trigger warning or trigger word, they would rape or harass the darker women. They would rape and harass them, but they wouldn't want to have babies with them because colorism. But then they would go inside the house and rape her and harass the light-skinned women, and then have babies with them, which is then white passing, and they wanted their babies to look a certain way and all of those things. So it's always been like Black women didn't have control of their bodies.
It still exists today when we talk about, especially, and I know that it's always like this ongoing debate about how Black women feel about Black men dating outside the race. It's not necessarily like you shouldn't do that. It's more so those who speak down on Black women in the process, like saying I would never date a Black woman because I want to date this whatchamacallit, or vice versa, when in reality, when situations have come, to fruition, that person isn't going to protect you like somebody of your own culture would, and sometimes they really are after the features.
Kind of what you said. If you want to date someone, if you want to date outside your race, why include me? Like, if I just understand, like, if you say I want to go date someone who might be racially ambiguous or doesn't identify as Black women,
do that.
That's fine. But why do you have to drag me in the process? I'm dating this person because you and your kind do X, Y, and Z. And it's just like, well, what do I have to do with
Right.
that? That's not me. Like, I'm not the one you about to be coming about business.
Like, I'm fine. You don't got to
literally just be minding. You literally just, it's like being on Twitter. You just be minding your business, and then it'd be like, black women hair don't look that nice unless they do X, Y, and Z. And you'd be like, what?
See,
I'm
that's
just,
how I get into this.
That's how I get into this.
Really?
Seriously. And then even more so just like in general, so like you're talking about like how black women never even had like control over their bodies. Then you think about, okay, let's take it to maybe like Jim Crow eras where, or even maybe after that, where black men could work. They're starting to get into the field or being somewhat treated like actual citizens in this world and stuff like that. Then you look back at all the abuse and trauma that great-grandparents and stuff went through. But even then, it's like, it's still deep-rooted in sexual and reproductive health and education and autonomy of your body because, you know, they were facing so much in the world, trying to make it as a black man in the world, and they would come back and take all of that out on the black women in their lives. Mm-hmm. So, same thing, they kind of turned into the slave masters. They're raping their women, they're beating their women, they're cheating on them, they're mistreating them, manipulating them, which is all sadly stuff that is still going on now. Like, black women are more likely to die at the hands of their partner than, you know, a stranger on the street, or be assaulted by someone in their family member or something like that than someone on the street. So it's still things that are happening. It may not be on that big of a scale, but it's still happening. So all of that, I would just sit here like, dang, everything comes back to sexual and reproductive health. Because when I'm teaching and I'm saying like, you need to be able to learn how to do boundaries, which we're all working on. You need to learn how to communicate better. Once again, a process. You need to learn how to say, this is my body and you cannot do X, Y, and Z to my body. And I think my biggest, like, I was just having a conversation, like my biggest takeaway whenever I'm teaching is I want people to walk away, of course, learning stuff and ways to protect themselves, but also just walking away with like autonomy. Like, this is my body. At the end of the day, this is my body. Like, you cannot tell me what to do with it. Even little kids, used to go up to them and like squeeze their faces or pick them up. All that stuff. Now to this day, I'll go up to like a 1-year-old. I'll be like, "Can I pick you up?"
I'm like, hey, just yeah, like, conversations from a distance, like, oh, you look so cute, but you don't have to.
Because it all comes back to consent too. Like, just it with sexual reproductive health. Yes. Oh, and today is actually like World Sexual Health Day.
Woo!
It may not be when this comes out, but it is today. But it's not just like everything about sexual reproductive health comes back to like your dismantling systems, because we already know, I mean, if we're being honest, the whole sexual liberation and like, oh, it's okay to, like the whole OnlyFans and don't sex shame anyone and all that stuff, a lot of that is being headed by white women, not black women. There's still a lot of shame for black women. Look at Cardi B and Megan, put it on WAP. But, a white girl could walk around and be like, I want to do X,
Miley Cyrus was literally twerking on VMAs,
nobody
naked on the wrecking ball.
Because it always comes back to policing the black bodies, policing black women, policing women in general. But it's just more so like it always comes back to autonomy over yourself, and then also like the other things. Like, what I like the most about the field I work in is you can't work in this field without paying attention to the intersectionalities. So I can't work in this field and not pay attention to those who have intellectual disabilities, because they too also need to know about their sexual and reproductive health.
That's true.
Regardless of what you think they should or should not be doing, they need to know about their body. Also, those who have intellectual disabilities are more likely to be taken advantage of because of those intellectual disabilities. So they need to learn. You can't take away racism. Why can't so-and-so have access to birth control? Oh, because their insurance may not provide it, or maybe they're not on insurance, or maybe they're in a birth control desert or something like that where it's not available. So you have to pay attention to that. Or you can flip that and say, why doesn't a black woman want to get on birth control? Because of the history of America testing on black bodies and, sterilizing black women without their knowledge back in the day. So you can't work in this field and not pay attention to it. I can't work in this field and say, oh, well, Black lives matter, but trans lives don't matter, because it also pays attention. Like, in the field I work in, I have to pay attention to everything. Yeah. Everything, even to the families who are being held by ICE. Like, you're like, how does that play into sexual and reproductive health? Yeah. There are children in there who are being abused. There are women in there who don't have menstrual products. There are just a plethora of things that all come back to sexual and reproductive health. Also, that is like the start of yourself. Like, you learn about all the outside things in the world before you learn about yourself, and I feel like it should be the opposite. Like, you need to learn about yourself. You need to learn about your body. You need to figure out your health. It's always going to be ongoing because you change, but if you can just get those basics down, then at least you would be able to go focus on other things.
Right.
Like, if I'm not worried about the next time I'm about to get a pad or a tampon or something like that, then I can probably, go apply for more jobs if I'm unemployed. Right. Or like
thrive. You can thrive more.
You can thrive more when you have like those
basic necessities.
Yeah, your basic necessities or needs met. Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably like the fun part. For a long time, and still now I struggle with it. For a long time, I was very like, my family is not going to be rocking with this. Like, if I tell them I just want to be like a sex therapist, or I just want to like teach sex ed and that's it, like, they're going to be like, no. So I framed it as, I want to work in maternal and child health because it's intersectional. And I'm very passionate about maternal and child health, but I don't need to work in that. Like, I don't need to actually work in that actual field. Yeah. I can advocate for it, I can volunteer in it, I can do all those things.
Did your mom know that you are?
Oh, my mom knows. I told her. My mom knows.
What did she say? What was her initial reaction?
She don't really pay attention to me. So when I speak about it, I remember I had a call. I told her, like, there's this lady I found. She's a black sex therapist. She's in Upper Marlboro. Like, she's certified through she has like the actual certificate and all that stuff like that, which is rare because, once again, a lot of the people who get to work in these fields are white or white passing because they have those privileges to pick a freer field because there's not money guaranteed in this field. So you always see black and brown people going into the fields that money is guaranteed in because of you're playing catch up, basically. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of great white women in this field who are doing great things, but it's still very heavily saturated. Even in reproductive justice, it's still very heavily saturated with white women being the forefront, or being the CEOs, or being the people who are running things, and then the black and brown women or the minorities who are actually in the community doing all the work. We're trying to change that though. But I was telling my mom, I was like, yeah, because, I think I really want to be a sex therapist. I'm really big on sexual and mental health. I'm going to set up an interview with her and do like an informational interview. And she was like, to do what? And I was like, because she's a sex therapist. My mom is just like, okay. So does that mean like you'll be going back to grad school? And I was like, yeah, I already told you I was going to go back to grad school. Yeah. I just need to know for what. And she was just like, okay. So... But also, every once in a while, like, I'll ask my mom questions, like, what did you know about your period growing up? And then she'll tell me, like, things about, like, my grandmother. And she'd just be like, we just knew not to get pregnant. So, like, even myself, I'm, like, learning about how my mom was taught, which then makes sense as to why she was teaching me some way. Because it's like, oh, girl, they weren't taught me. I have a friend who always says,
parents can only teach you and love you as much as they know, and as much as they know how to love. And so you can't really fault them. It's funny, she's right over there. But it's funny because, it's so important, like you said, even it's stuff like sexual reproductive health, because 9 times out of 10, if a parent is uncomfortable having that conversation, it's because they either had an uncomfortable situation that has occurred with them, or their parent didn't necessarily explain, or they never really had it explained to them, so they don't really know to break it down. Because if you think about it, even when you're in school, they always tell you really know when you've mastered a subject when you can teach somebody else. So a lot of times more than others, parents can't functionally teach their children because they don't really know, it's kind of still trial and error for some people too. And so I think that is really, like you said, really important that you were able to have that conversation with your mom to say, so how was this for you? Because even, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Even I know sometimes my mom and I, we've gotten closer as I've gotten older, but there's still some taboo things that I don't know if parents just think that once you get